We have today, for the next 10 minutes, John Mangano. John's the SVP of Analytics at DeepIntent, and he's got some updates for you here on what the company's up to these days. DeepIntent is our proud title sponsor, and we're thrilled to have John with us today. So please, John.
Do you have a clicker? Perfect. All right, well, thank you for having me. So I was told I had 15 minutes, so I will go very fast. It'll be a short 15, I promise. So thank you for having me. For those of you who don't know DeepIntent, we're the first DSP that is purpose-built for healthcare. And what a DSP is ultimately it's the ad tech that agencies use to find and target people throughout the wild world of the internet in programmatic fashion. So what we've done is something unique in that we've combined not just a DSP component, but the planning component as well as the analytics and measurement so we can do real-time optimization. And we do that through basically bolting in to the DSP health claims data. So in doing that, we can determine if we reach the right patient the same day that we ultimately serve the ad and do our optimizations really quickly. That's the last I'll talk about what we do, but it's important to know in context of what we'll be showing you. So first, it's kind of funny to talk about CTV because TV is like pharma's oldest friend, first love, so to speak. And I spent a lot of my career working with the industry to help them understand how digital is a good complementary component to television. And now we're talking about television again being complementary. And we spend a lot of time talking about how it's different. We're all sitting on this side of the glass doing what we do, working with audiences and managing the tech. But how does the consumer feel? And if you think about it, when TV started, these are my parents, got married around 1950. So they are the first television generation. So like TV was like the internet for a lot of us, right? And so they were the ones who were being exposed to ads. They'd probably turn their TV on, probably see I Love Lucy. I don't really know what else played back then. And then ultimately saw an ad and had some type of reaction or didn't, and either bought the product or didn't buy the product, and went on their merry way. And if you think about it, it's not very different for the people on the other side of the glass. If you look at us today, we too can watch I Love Lucy, as it happens, on Hulu. And as we watch it, we will be shown ads as well. And we may react to it, we may not. So we spend a lot of time talking about the differences here about CTV, but we're not really sure how much even consumers feel that difference. And that's one of the things that, as DeepIntent, because we are very active in the CTV space, we wanted to make sure we understood where consumers were and ultimately where is it going and how is it different from what we know today about television, linear television as a whole. So we started to do a little research. And if you look at the numbers, 80% of the population has a CTV television, one or more. And if you look at viewing behavior on their CTV devices, and this is something we got from our partners at LG, 96% are streaming. It makes sense, you have a CTV, you should, right? 90% are using SVOD. And for those of you who don't know the acronyms, SVOD is subscription video on demand, so that's Netflix, Prime, that sort of stuff. And then 72% are using AVOD. Now, these are not mutually exclusive groups. AVOD is advertised-based video on demand. So, we see that in Hulu, Tubi, all those other channels that we all use. So just to pause there, 72% are ultimately watching ads already through their CTV platform, outside of linear. Then you look at linear, 46%. So you have a smart TV, but smart TV also does things like cable and everything else, right? So we're watching, what we see there. And the funny thing is, as I compressed this deck from a longer deck, I'd never actually put these two graphs together. And as I was putting it together just last night, I looked at it and I started to realize something. If you first look at the AVOD population and you realize that 80% of the population that has a CTV and 72% are using AVOD, so 80% of 72% gets you 58% of people that you can reach via AVOD. And then the 42% you can't. Maybe they're not yet on it or they never will be. But remember that number, 58%. Because then I was also looking at that linear number. And if you do the math, right, 80% use CTV, so right off the bat, 20% are using linear, okay? And then 46% of this 80% is is using their CTV for linear. You realize that by combining those, you have 57% that are reachable via linear TV. 58% of the population reachable via AVOD, 57% ultimately reachable via linear. So we're at the point where AVOD is actually, in terms of people reached, at the same size. Now, I pulled this together based off of these. I'd love to do more research. I'm probably within 5 or 10% of the actual number here. But the point is, it's at the point where AVOD is as big as linear television. So when we start looking at campaigns and looking at the future of television media, that's got to play a big part of the discussion. So what we want to do is figure out, how is it that the consumer ultimately feels about CTV and the CTV environment? And the only way to know really how a consumer feels is to ask them. So we did a survey, and we surveyed just under 3,000 people. The thing is, I've been in the analytics world for a long time. Surveys are really good at finding out how people feel. Not so good when finding out the things that they did. So, I wanted to make sure that we had some accuracy here in when people spoke about what they were doing in terms of just how they felt. Because the first question that we would ask was ultimately, what were they doing? So our partners at LG allowed us to survey their users, and they helped us bucket them in 3 groups. People who used only CTV on their LG TV, people who only used linear television on their LG TV, and then people who used both. And the first thing we asked is, first question we wanted to answer is, do they realize they're using CTV? And the answer was, not really, not always. So we asked them, of the shows you watch regularly, do you do it via streaming or via your cable satellite box? And of course, we didn't call it linear TV because most people don't really know what linear TV is. And how they answered was they're all using linear. How they behaved when you looked at their actual television data is more people were using their streaming services to watch their shows than their linear service. So we started to see that, okay, so we know what CTV is a thing, and the good thing is, and this is really a compliment to the industry, nobody even knows that they've made the transition. So we reference a lot cord cutters, like there's some ceremony that people pull out their cord and cut it and everyone cheers, right? But most people aren't understanding there's a cord cutting situation happening. They just got a new TV and they're getting their services this way, and they're like, well, I don't really need cable anymore. I've got the internet from the cable company. But in fact, there are CTV users and magically have become the unicorn cord cutter that we've been talking about for years. And the next question we want to the next question we want to answer was, as everything changes, how open were they to advertising? Because, Prime is really good at introducing no advertising, right? Is that the future? And, there had been discussions for a while. So we straight up asked. And the key is, if you ask someone, would you rather not have advertising? Most people would say, yeah, I'd rather not, of course, right? But if you put it into perspective, would you rather pay more for your content or watch ads and not pay as much? 2/3 would rather watch the ads than ultimately pay more for their content. So advertising is welcome. And when you ask specifically, okay, well, what ads do you respond well to? It's the ones that are relevant to their interests. So we saw that over half liked ads that were relevant to them. 11% didn't. And if you ask the opposite question, it flips. 52% just don't like ads if they're not relevant to them. So relevancy is so important. And that's a unique value that we get from CTV, is that we're able to make them more relevant through the targeting that we all participate in. The next question had to do about CTV. So the questions were 2 things, right? One was, are they more relevant? And are they more appealing to you on CTV versus linear television? And it was a close tie. So 57% and 54% respectively said, no, there were more. So it's, it's not too dramatically off, and it was a very binary thing. It's either more relevant or less relevant. But you'll start to see that people start to recognize that we want it to be relevant to my things that I'm interested in, and CTV seems to be more relevant to me. So there's an opportunity for pharma. The challenge we also asked was, well, do you feel that pharma ads are well targeted? And we didn't get great scores on it. We found 26% said they were good to excellent. So there's room to move. Now, there was a 32% that said fair, but fair isn't what got people to say that they ultimately appreciated the ads and would act upon them. And the thing about it is that pharma ads are really helpful. So asking the same people, did it do a good job at providing helpful information to your household? 65% said yes. So if you can find the right people, it is providing the right content and ultimately giving them useful information. But what really matters is if they're taking action. And so looking at the respondents, we found that 27% said they had talked to a doctor about medical treatments after learning about it through advertising. Now, the problem with this stat, as I said earlier, you can't trust what people tell you. You really need to look at what their behavior is. You hope they're telling you the truth, but it's really hard to remember, right? And what are those influences? So, fortunately, being DeepIntent, we have all sorts of campaigns that we measure, and all of them are attached to claims data. So that gives us the ability to measure them in a pretty fast fashion. So what we did is we did a bunch of studies, and this one was, to me, the most interesting one, where we took a specific brand, and we had all the components of a digital campaign. We had display ads, we had online video, we also had CTV. But in addition to that, we had their linear TV viewing. And where we got this was through our partnership with LG, where we use the ACR data, which ultimately acts just like any other digital campaign data that you would measure against. So this gave us the ability to look at when someone was exposed and ultimately, did they get on script? And specifically, we looked at new-to-brand scripts. And to see, okay, what is the script rate difference between all these categories? So first, looking at traditional digital, we saw that online video, or CTV, performed twice that of online video. Looking at display, it performed at 2.5 times that of online video. But the real test, the real question that we were trying to answer is, what about CTV? Because that's the sister, cousin, however you want to describe CTV and linear TV, and how are they going to perform, and ultimately, how can they complement each other, but also kind of boost the performance of television? And what we found was pretty exciting. We found that in this particular study, where we had the exact same ad for the exact same brand, for the exact same condition, at the exact same period, 5 times the number of MBRX for the CTV campaign as for the linear TV campaign. So, and much of that has to do with the ability to target, finding the right people at the right time. Because going back to the beginning, most people don't even know they're watching CTV. So they're just watching their show. It just happens to be that those ads are more relevant. And when the ads are more relevant, patients respond better. And when they respond better, they learn about the condition and go speak to their doctor. So in conclusion, TV is TV. CTV is here, even though a lot of the people viewing it don't know it. Relevant ads are really important. That's the key to a campaign. And I don't know if that's changed any since the 1950s when people first started seeing ads. Patients are positively impacted by pharma ads, and ultimately, it drives MBRX. And that's all I have for you.